Welcome to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we discuss the history, facts, people, places, events, lots more surrounding Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinsideout.com. Today's show is brought to you by Central Arkansas's favorite radio station, KVRE. Find them on the dial at 92.9 FM. Stream them live at kvre.com.
It is another episode of Hot Springs Village Inside Out with Mr. Randy, Dennis, myself, and Mr. Todd Noles. And Todd, I tell you what, I would say, you know, jack of all trades, master of nearly all of them. Yeah. Todd, how are you today, buddy?
I appreciate that.
You doing okay today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
We're doing great. We got a little wet earlier, but we're fine now.
Yes,
we're in between the storms. Tell us what you do. Tell us what your titles are. And I know you're acting in some capacity, and then your regular job is something else. Give us a feel. What do you do in the POA?
I currently am the Common Property, Forestry, and Wildlife Manager and Assistant Street Superintendent. Jason Temple and I are currently leading the street department as, we're looking for a superintendent. So we're kind of filling in that position until we get one hired in. So we're kind of doing a little bit of all of it.
Well, we were talking to him the other day, and he was talking about the culvert. We did a show on culverts, and obviously that's included in the streets. And he mentioned that you would be a great interview to chat with. How did you get started? Were you born in the village? Were you born here?
I was born right on the outside of the village in Jessieville. I've lived in Jessieville my whole life. I married my high school sweetheart. All of our kids went to Jessieville. I'm just a homegrown boy. I started work at the POA actually in 1989 for a lady named Daphne Hobbs at the rec center. You used to have to pay an admission to get in. And I tell you what, that was a happening place back in the day. I mean, this
was where again? At the where? Say that.
At the rec center.
Oh, the rec center.
Now is the pickleball courts and the mini golf. And we had an admission table there, or a kind of little admission building, and we stood in there and took money, and people were going in. And I tell you, for the high school kids and for the young adults, the pool and the rec center, that was the hangout.
Well, that was the mini golf and the basketball and everything.
The basketball, else. Yeah, they would, you'd have pickup games constantly, and the mini golf was full, the pool was full, and a bunch of us young guys like going to the pool because we like to see the girls down there. But that's how I got a job up there. But anyhow, I started there in '89. And I worked there until I graduated in '91 temporarily through the summer. And then I started full-time at the POA in '95. We was doing construction. And at the time, from Ponce de Leon East was dirt. And what we done in construction, we went in and we buried all the underground utilities into the new subdivisions that they were building. And back then, you couldn't stop anywhere in Hot Springs Village without hearing a hammer. I mean, it was just, they were building going on everywhere. And so we put all the utilities in down toward the east end. And it was, I've done a little bit of all of it. So then in 2004, I started to work at the street department. And I worked at the street department from 2004 to 2019. 2011, we had a tornado hit. So we had trees down all over common property that we had to get cleaned up. Well, you had to be kind of licensed in order to go in and do that kind of work to get the grants from Saline County and what have you, So I went to school overnight for University of Arkansas at Monticello, and I got my associate's degree in forest management. And that allowed us to go in and survey the common property and remove all the trees and everything. And then they wanted a forestry and common property manager 2 years ago. And so I took that position, and then our street superintendent left, and because of all my experience working in the streets for all those years, and Jason Temple and I teamed up and kind of leading that group.
Well, I tell you what, we're lucky to have you, and that is not an exaggeration in any stretch. I think some of the things that people don't realize, and I want to come back to this. There's some common misconceptions. Number one, trees will live forever. We'll just leave these trees. We won't cut them. We don't need to thin them. Why would you cut all these trees? What is the problem? And the problem is they will die of old age, and people just don't have a clue.
Right. And the trees is, when they get to be a certain age, and if you want to sell the timber, they create something, what we call in the forestry business is red heart. And that means that a logger has to, in order to sell that timber, has to cut it about 8 or 10 foot up from the stump, because you're losing that timber at the bottom, which is red heart. It's over, it's too old, and a red heart gets in it, it rots. You can't make lumber out of it. So they have to, what they call jump butt it, and that's cutting it up high. And, a tree is like a human. It's got a lifespan. I mean, you can have some 120, 140-year-old, but when they reach a certain age, then they do go to dying out. And most of the time it's your pine trees. Your pine trees is what is the biggest problem. And, Hot Springs Village, unfortunately, has a great number of pine trees because, at one time, the village was owned by a timber company, and they planted pine trees for harvesting. And if you don't manage those pine trees, then they get overgrown, which can, it's very susceptible to diseases or to, high winds. A pine tree got a lot shallower root system than your hickories or your oaks or your other hardwoods. So your pine trees are going to be the first ones blown over usually.
Now, we do have, and we have a beetle issue I want to come back and talk about for a minute. But one of the most common questions that we get, and I'm trying to give the outside viewer listener that hasn't even been to the village what we've got, and that is, Todd, was it the first 18,000 acres or so that Cooper bought from? Actually, they bought it from Dirks, and then Dirks sold out to Weyerhaeuser the first time. Right. Mm-hmm. And basically from the far west end, about 8 miles in or something like that, right around Balboa, where the Balboa Road is, where the Woodlands is. That was the first block.
Right.
And Cooper bought that first block and said, okay, we're going to develop this. We're going to turn it into something. And they're working very feverishly to do that. Then as they're continuing, they realize they may want the rest of this that goes on out to the other highway. But in that meanwhile, Weyerhaeuser has clear cut it and planted back pines, plantation pines, very, very tightly in places, which is what they did. And so as you go from the west end of the village to the east, you have very mixed timber, and then on the east end, it's virtually all pine. Is that pretty accurate?
You're very accurate. Most of your trees on the east side, I'm going to say from Ponce de Leon east, are nearly all pine. I mean, I say that probably 70% are pines. Yeah. And most of them haven't been planted. And when they plant them in rows. And over the years, a pine tree will seed itself. Huh. So if you don't go in and harvest them, or manage your timber over the years, then they seed yourself. They get, way overgrown because it started growing up in the middle of those rows. And that's what we've run into at some of our spots at our east end, because then you got what you mentioned a while ago called a pine beetle. You got a Ips beetle, and they travel by wind. And if they get started in a pine tree, and they attack pine trees that are stressed, and if you've got an overgrown plantation, those pine trees are not absorbing enough sunlight because of the canopies are so tight that they become stressed. It's kind of like getting choked out. And that allows your beetles then to attack, and then they spread throughout that stand of timber, and it can decimate acres and acres and acres of timber. It has through it in other places of Arkansas.
And I don't think people have a clue. And I'm certainly not a forester in any street. I own a lot of timber, but I don't know a lot. I don't know a lot about that. But I will tell you, and I'm learning. I'm planning on learning more. But so there's roughly 44,000 square feet in an acre, roughly. roughly.
Yeah, right.
And I'm told, but I heard this actually in the Village Voice probably 15 years ago, that you need between 180 and 200 trees per acre. And most people think, well, yeah, that sounds about right. I can show you acres here in the village that must have 800 trees on them. And
Right.
it's just so overly grown. And where any daylight did reach the ground in Arkansas, and we got plenty of rain, something sprouts. And so all of this thicket that you may think looks like a relatively healthy forest, is it?
No, a bunch of places it's not. And what the Forest Service does to maintain a bunch of their new growth or undergrowth that makes the forest overgrown, really, is they go in and do a controlled burn. But we can't do controlled burn here in the village because we have so many people with respiratory issues. So we have to try to remove it mechanically or go in and thin it, and when we get through thinning it, then clean up behind us and get it looking nice again, like a park-like setting. Is what a bunch of people want.
And let's talk about, so, I mean, there's a lot of, it sounds like to me, your hands are tied in many ways. I mean, there's a subdivision, and in that subdivision along the road, there are home lots that Cooper has sold. In between those lots or behind those lots, many times there's a green space, and that's where Cooper ran the utilities, or where you ran the utilities or the plumbing and the whatever. And the POA owns that common property. That's the exact name, right?
Right. Yeah, it's common property.
So,
and my job, really, what I'm over here, Dennis, is I'm over all the lake dams, the spillways, the common property, the road right of ways, all that. That all goes into common property forestry, and also your wildlife, which is the urban deer hunt. And but like you were talking about, you have to thin in the village. You were talking about how your hands are kind of tied. There's certain strategic matters that you have taken place before you thin timber here in the village. You have to, because you've got small strips of common that you might want to take some trees out of that go right behind people's houses. And like you were just saying. So you have to kind of get with your logger. You have to get a logger first that has small equipment. You can't use any of the big commercial stuff like that they thin with everywhere else, because they have these big delimbers and and they go in and they go to cutting and then they tear down everything else around the trees. But you've got to thin it. It takes longer, but you have to thin it with a chainsaw, and you have to fall your trees individually to keep from hurting the other trees that's there. And then you have to skid them out. By skidding them out, I'm talking about pulling them out to what they call a setting to load on a log truck. You have to skid them out with a small tractor so you don't damage any of the other trees or any of the other vegetation that may be in that stand that you're wanting to keep. And so, there is quite a bit that you have to take into consideration. Plus, you have to go back in. Used to what we done when we done a thinning, we would slash the trees up, which is leave the limbs and cut them up, slash them up, and leave them to about 18 inches out on the fourth floor. Well, when you go in behind somebody's house and you're thinning and you leave all this brush out there on the ground, in a year or two it's going to rot, and they won't hardly be able to tell it's there. But at that time is what they're seeing, and they don't like seeing that. So now we've if we thin an area, we're trying to clean all that stuff up behind us. So we're trying to get a healthy forest and also clean it up too behind us, and clean all the tops and stuff out. But you want to leave a few, like your dead trees on the ground and different places for your wildlife, for your birds and your wildlife to have places to get and to be able to feel secure. But we have to clean up now a bunch of what we're thinning, simply because we don't leave a mess behind somebody's house.
Well, what about if I have a home and I want to, there's a beautiful little spot behind my house that's common property owned by the POA. And I think I'd like to put a little shed back there or a little pavilion. Can I do that?
No, you can't build any structure on common property. Any structure, walkway, path, anything like that, you can't, it's against policy to build anything like that on common property.
Well, I see people that live at the end of a cul-de-sac And many times Cooper would put a little piece of land right in the middle. It's not all just asphalt, but there's a little circle in the middle. And I've seen people put patio furniture or stuff like that. As long as it's not permanent, is that okay?
Yeah, and if as long as it's not permanent, and if they do something like that, they have to. And then you're right, here there is several places in the middle of cul-de-sacs, but they have to maintain that also. Like they're responsible for keeping the weeds down and keeping it picked up, cleaned up, and keeping it looking. Because there's some places that have done that in the past years ago. They built a wooden fence around it, and then they quit maintaining it. Now it's grown up with briars and thickets, and the wooden fence is rotten. And then we have to go back in and tear it all out, and haul it off and get it cleaned back up. So, that's one of the reasons they don't like you to put anything permanent on common.
Well, now, so I'm with the Town Homeowners Association. Also, I work with them, and they have another kind of common property called limited common property.
Right.
And that's just for the townhome. Is that correct?
Right. That's just for the townhouse association.
And, we were asking, I'll tell you, one of the things we were discussing in the Town Homeowners Association is that we had a gentleman who just pulled up a hypothetical, and he made the note. He said he thought he would like to have an electric car. Okay, sure. He said, well, I think I'd like to put a charger out front of my house. And I'm like, I don't know that you own that property. Yeah, that's my parking spot. I'm like, no. So what a lot of people don't understand is that for most townhouses, you own the 5 to 7 feet around that house. And then everything outside of that is the THA limited common property.
Limited common property, yeah.
So you would have to dig a trench across limited common property, put up a stand. And so nobody owns a particular parking spot. Nobody owns their backyard with the Town Homeowners Association, et cetera. So, I mean, there's complications there. How do you know who to call when?
Well, if you live in a townhouse, my suggestion would be, if you wanted to know anything about the land that's pretty close to your home, is contact Townhouse Association first, because they could tell you if it was limited common property or not. Then maybe call the POA and we can come out, and I can come out and let you know exactly what it is.
So I have a tree, and I'm just trying to cover all the common issues that I hear people say about. I have a tree in a backyard and it's leaning over. It looks like it's going to fall, and it's on common property. Do I call you guys?
If it's on common property, yes. And we'll get it taken care of. If it's on limited common property, they have been people called before in situations like that. I went out and looked at it, and I just explained to them that it was limited common property, that they would have to contact the Townhouse Association. But the best thing to do is just call the POA. I'll come out and look at it. It's better to be safe than sorry. I mean, if I can't touch it because it's on limited common property, I'll explain to you. I'd love to do it, but I can't because it's on townhouse. And
let's move back down to the pine beetle, if I can, just for a second.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, I had a lot on Ponce Golf Course number 2 on Sergio, and we had cleared a lot of the underbrush. Now, let me make this clear. We cleared everything that was 4 feet, well, not everything, but things that were 4 inches or in diameter and smaller. We cut those without a permit. So anything bigger than that, we would have needed a permit. Is that correct?
Right. Yes,
okay. And that's on unimproved property. If I've got something bigger than 4 inches and I have a house, do I need a permit too?
If you've got anything bigger than 4 inches and you have a house and your land is over a half an acre, then yes, you have to have a permit.
Okay. And how do you go about getting that permit?
You go and see permitting and inspections, and you get a residential tree cutting permit. And now if you have a dead tree that's about to fall on your house, you don't have to have a permit to cut that tree.
Okay. Well, and you're going to the point I was going to touch. When we were clearing this lot, or clearing the underbrush on this lot, we found a tree that, oh my Lord, it was 32 to 36 around. It was a big pine tree. And there was just handfuls of this, it looked like dust, just pink or a sandy colored dust at the bottom. I looked up in the top of the tree, and the tree is 80 feet tall. It's a monster, and there's no bark halfway up the top of the tree and on up. And I called the neighbor and I said, I'm going to do something with this tree because this tree is dead. And he was like, oh no, it looks pretty good, because the stuff, except for the debris around the bottom and the fact it didn't have any pine bark halfway up the tree.
Yeah.
And we evaluated and learned very quickly it was obviously dead. So we took that one down. But how does this pine beetle, it goes into stressed tree communities, and how does this even work?
Well, your pine trees, they get stressed either by, if you have a rainy season and they're like in a bad wet spot, if you have a drought and the pine trees are stressed for water, if they're overgrown, thin, any kind of stressful situation that can stress the tree. If you dig a ditch by them and you cut some of the root systems, it can cause the tree to be stressed. And the pine beetle attacks that tree when it gets stressed. They burrow into it. And when they burrow into it, most of the time you'll see holes about the size of your pinky or a little smaller, all over the tree. Looks like you've shot it with squirrel shot or something, And then at the base of the tree, you'll have a bunch of little real fine sawdust. And that's where they burrowed in and kind of kicked the sawdust out. Now, you'll see a bunch of woodpeckers on that tree because trying to get some of them. But whenever they attack that tree, they become dormant during the wintertime. The cold months is when they sit in there and they don't do any action. But when it goes to warming back up, that's when they really go to spreading and attacking. And they travel by wind. So if you've got a hole such as what we had down at the east end that we're taking out right now, if you got a whole bunch of thick grown pine trees and you don't do anything about it, and you've got 10 or 12 that's dead with pine beetles in them, and you let them go till it warms up in the spring and summer, they're just going to go through that stand, and just before long, in a couple of years, you're going to have nothing but a bunch of dead pine trees.
Is removal the solution?
It is. Removal is the best solution. Removal and burn. I have found a mill that actually will buy our dead timber, so I can sell it to the mill. And what I'm doing in the project I got going on in Delcano, I'm selling the pine trees that we remove, and I'm trying to take that money and put back in to pay for our cleanup, where it's kind of going to pay for itself, but we'll get done what we need done. It's not really about making profit as it is having a healthy stand of timber. And it'll allow I've trying to leave some of our smaller oaks and some of our smaller hardwoods that's been trying to grow all these years, but was shaded out. Now sunlight can hit them, and you'll see them really go to performing once we get done in the project we're in now. But removal is about the only thing you can do. When you get a pine beetle infestation, you've got to take them out. If you don't, you're going to have just more and more and more.
Well, what would the average homeowner do if they saw the dust around the tree, they saw the boring holes, they knew there was a problem, what should they do? And number one, who on earth would buy dead timber? I got to hear this story, but, but I'm like, I think I can keep you full, man,
Yeah, well, believe it or not, that your dead timber makes the prettiest wood, especially pine beetle timber.
Distressed wood with holes and wormholes, or what?
Yeah, well, the pine beetles actually, whenever a tree, they get in there and the tree dies, causes a fungus to grow inside the tree. So when you saw your logs and you stick them through a planer, I know this because a buddy of mine owns a sawmill, and I went up there and watched it because I didn't believe it at first. But when you saw that log and you stick it through a planer, and a planer, makes the log smooth.
Sure.
It's got the prettiest blue and red and different color markings in the grain. And so people, they like that. So I found a mill actually that will buy the dead timber. Now, they don't pay me much for it. I'm just getting $10 a ton for it. But it's better than letting it lay on the ground and rot, and not get anything. So, but I did find someone to take it. And they're using it. They can use it to make pulp, or pulp wood. They can use it to make ASB, or they use it to make furniture also.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
You can usually sell it to these private sawmills. It's not very big, they'll buy it from you that owns the sawmill, the dead timber, to make different kind of furniture. Baby cribs, man, I've seen some baby cribs made out of this. A guy made out of dead timber that he had sawed up. He had a sawmill. Beautiful. It had all these different colors in the grain, and all he done was planed it down and built it and put polyurethane on it. And I mean, it was beautiful. It had all these different colors in it, and it had all these different little markings where the beetles had, their little tunnels, and it's pretty wild looking at it. I mean,
incredible.
Yeah.
So back to my question. I've got a tree in the backyard that I think has these pine beetles, and I mean, as Randy said, what's the long-term solution? Do we need to cut down a lot of them, or is there? How big is the problem, and what's the issue?
If you get pine beetles and your tree is still alive, you can go to Walmart and you can buy some stuff called now I forgot the name of it, but anyhow, Bayer.
We'll look it up.
Bayer, that's it. Bayer. It's like the aspen. It's a Bayer brand, and it's for beetles and stuff in trees. And you can buy that, and you can mix it with your water, put it in a pump-up sprayer, and spray your pine tree with it in the holes and everywhere else on that pine tree. And a bunch of times you can save that pine tree. I went out and done it for property owners before they couldn't do it. They had a tree they were worried about, and and they were elderly, and couldn't. And I just told them, I said, if you'll buy it, I'll come out and do it for you. And I have, and we've saved some pine trees by doing that. But once that bark goes to slipping and you see those holes in it, yeah, you take it down because there's no saving it.
Do the beetles start lower and work their way up? Are they at the top?
Well, they usually start in about midways of the tree.
Okay.
Whenever they start attacking it, they'll start about the midways of it, and then they'll just expand from top to bottom. And like I said, you can save a tree as long as your bark. When you see the bark go to slipping, and by slipping I mean the bark goes to falling off, it's just too late. You're going to have it cut down.
Now the removal project that you mentioned before.
Right.
What's the timeline on that?
Well, we're about 50% complete on it right now. It depends on the weather. I know I looked at the weather this morning, it's supposed to rain every day next week. And you got to let the area you're in kind of stay a little dry so you don't rut it up, with your tractor getting in and out. So it's going to probably prolong. So if we get some good weather, probably about 3 more weeks, and we should have it completed. I'm going to look at it when we get done. Of course, we're cleaning it up, and it's right on the side of DeSoto Boulevard. I mean, so when you come in the East Gate, you're going to be able to see it, especially if you turn up Elcano. So I'm going to kind of look at it when we get done with it, and when we get done cleaning it up. And if there's anything I need to do to spruce it up, to make it, as pretty as I can make it, because it's going to be the entrance to our village. I'm going to try to do that. So my plan is right now just to get it cleaned up, get our proper spacing on our trees, and get them growing good again. And then, take a look at it, what it looks like. I may go in and plant some native wildflowers, this partial sun to get them growing up into the stand of trees that we have, and something to make it look good when you come in our village.
How do you keep tabs on all these different areas as far as the condition of the timber? And it's a lot of property to oversee.
It is. It's a lot, but you can kind of, if you're used to it and you know what you're looking for, if you're driving down the road, it just kind of stands out. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not trying to boast or anything, but I can drive down the road and I can see a pine. It just stands out like a sore thumb, and when you see a big group of them, like what we seen down here where we're working at, I think standing at the road, I counted 18 dead trees just within a wad, and those beetles had started just going through that timber. So, in a situation like that, yeah, it's time to take action. And that's what we had to do there. I hate it because we have to take out so many trees. And I hate it that we have to lose a buffer zone for the people on Victoria Lane, between there and DeSoto. And that's what I said, I'm going to work as hard as I can to try to get it right back for them. But we also want to maintain that timber that we've got and allow it to be healthy for them so they can still live in a forest environment instead of having to take it all out.
Yeah, I think that's partly, and to everybody that we've interviewed that works with the POA, it's a balancing act. We talked to Brad, and Brad's like Brad Meredith with the lakes, and Brad's like, the fishermen want me to put fertilizer around the lake, and that'll increase the algae bloom. Well, everybody who swims in the lake doesn't want algae in the lake, and we want color clarity. And we think of a good healthy lake as something you can see the bottom of. Well, maybe not so much. That's more of a sterile lake.
Right.
So, and I'm in my mind, I'm hearing what you're talking about on the east end there, but Todd, I know where this is. You know where Cambrai is, just northwest of Cortez, Cambrai subdivision?
I do.
I mean, there is nothing there. There is 2 homes in the entire subdivision, but there are trees that are 55 inches around and easily 80 feet tall. They are monsters. Some of those trees are worth some serious money. Yeah. But it's on private land. Somebody owns that lot. Right. And I'm sure, for example, let's talk about the DeSoto area where you're talking about there, where Pizarro, the second entrance of Pizarro down by DeMonte on DeSoto, there's 3 or 4 acres there that were commercially sold. They're talking about putting a hotel there and whatever. And that is textbook plantation pine. The trees are in a row. They make a pattern, and they probably need to be thinned, and that's somebody else's land. You can't just come in and go, hey, you need your stuff thinned. We're going to thin it. You can only work on the common property, right?
Right. We can't get on anything private. And believe it or not, your plantation pines, they don't bring as much money as just your regular loblolly pines that, that's grown here, because a plantation pine is a type of pine tree that they plant to get it to grow fast.
Right.
Because they're in it, the timber company plants it. They want a fast growing pine tree where they can come back in and harvest it in a few years. And the growth rings on it, if you cut it, are not as tight as they are up around the west end of our village. So therefore, you don't make as good a lumber as some of your loblollies that you have. I say loblolly, there's different words for it, but anyhow, I call them loblolly pines. It's up around our west end. The east end pine trees, just their growth rings are not as tight, and they don't make as good a lumber. But they're so thick is the biggest problem with them, because they've never been thinned, they've never been managed, and we've now started running into problems because of that. You mentioned Pizarro. There's a place on Pizarro right now that we're going to have to move to once we get done where we're at.
Well, 2 things. You and I were in a meeting the other day. We met with Tucker and the Forestry and Common Areas Board, the committee, and fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And Tucker had some interesting comments, and he can kind of be the historian because he knows, he was here when they were doing it, as you were too. But he talked about when Cooper bought the last 12,000 or whatever it was that made it 26,000 acres, that when they bought that last 12,000 acres or whatever, it had already been, some of it had been clear cut and already been replanted in pines. The plan at the time for Weyerhaeuser was that they would plant those pines. They would grow very quickly for the first few years. They would come in and thin those areas like we're talking about out, where they were just plantation pines. Would they take that out and just pulp it, just sell it for pulpwood?
Yeah, chip it.
Chip it up and sell it for pulp. And then that would leave those other trees less stressed, and they would have a good trawl stand. Well, in the meanwhile, Cooper sold them.
Exactly.
And then Cooper wasn't in the mood to go, hey, we're gonna clean this land up before we sell it to you. 36 and 38 Pizarro. Diane and I own 36 and 38. It's a double lot, not on the golf course side of Pizarro, but on the other side. And I was having some guys clear that up too with the 4 inches and smaller. And this is a double lot. It's a better part of an acre.
Right.
And they've come in and cleared everything. And I came in to look at it behind, and I'm going, no, that one has to go, and 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 that one. I probably cut another 8 that had a beetle damage.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't see it until we had already cleared the lot, so, I mean, you know what to look for. I couldn't see it until we'd already cleared the 4-inch stuff and the thickets and all that underneath from outside of it.
Right. Yeah. And there's some places on Pizarro. There's one place in particular that I found, matter of fact, Monday of this week, that we're going to have to go in. The beetles have infested it. They killed, I think there's 18 trees right on the side of Pizarro. It's dead, and big trees. I'm talking about these pretty good sized trees. You measure a tree, Forestry measures a tree DBH. They call it, this diameter of breast height.
No, and, I'm sorry, say that again a little slower.
A forester measures a tree. If you go to talking forestry with a logger or whatever, they say, how big a trees you got? You say like, well, it's 18 inches DBH. DBH means diameter of breast height. That's how you measure trees. And, so some of them over there is they're 36 inches DBH, big trees, no bark on them at all. I mean, they're gone. Sawdust at the bottom on the ground. That's the number one thing you can tell. It's called an Ips beetle. Now we have southern pine beetles, and if you'll notice and I'll show you sometime or another when I see you, Dennis, I've got some pictures from some trees here in the village. They're not as common here in the village as the Ips beetle, but there is some, and they'll burrow into a tree, and you'll see they got a big tar ball on the side of the tree where they went in. It causes that sap to run out, and it'll make a kind of a ball in the hole. But most of it's Ips beetles, and that's where you'll see all the sawdust at the base of your tree. And these trees I'm talking about on Pizarro, it's just ground's covered with sawdust.
Now, I don't know what timber prices are going for. I know they've been really astronomical, and I'm about to learn, apparently. But I can't help but you're talking about a 36-inch DBA.
Yeah, DBA.
That could be $1,000 tree or more, right?
Yeah, I'm getting what I'm getting right now out of what I'm taking out at the East Gate is my part, or the POA's part. I say mine. The POA's part is $23 a ton for anything 8-inch top or bigger. It's $10 a ton for everything with a 6-inch top or smaller, and $10 a ton for all of our dead stuff. So that's pretty fair. I mean, it's dropped a couple of dollars from 2 or 3 years ago. It's kind of hard to believe because your lumber prices are going up, but your timber prices are not, they're just kind of shady. But that's what I'm getting. It's a pretty good price. I think the loggers selling them at the mill for like $41 a ton for everything 8-inch and bigger, and I'm getting 23 of that. So I mean, so we've worked out a pretty good negotiation deal with them, and then I, like I said, for the money I make off of this timber, then I can put back into getting it cleaned up for the people coming into the village.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that goes through my mind, I'm just if you haven't stood beside a tree that's 36 inches at chest height, that's a lot of lumber.
It is.
It's a lot of lumber, and unfortunately, it's a lot of about to be dead lumber. That's
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, that stand that we're thinning, it was like a swamp because the drainage wasn't opened up. We just went in Monday and opened the drainage for the water to run out of it. But the trees in that are bringing more money because they're heavier because they've got all that water in them. So that they kind of helped us out a little bit. So yeah, we're doing pretty good on that. But
if somebody has property or they live on a lot that has, a lot of pine trees and they suspect infestation, who can they call?
They can call the POA, and I'll come out. I'll assist them any way I can. I'll help them, and that's what I tell them when I talk to them. Most of them have my number, or most of them I've dealt with have my work cell, and I'll tell them, look, if you need help with anything at all, don't hesitate to call. I'll help you with anything that you need.
Randy, if he sends us, I'm sorry, I apologize, Todd. If he sends us a couple of pictures, can we put them on this?
Yeah, I was going to ask him to send us some pictures that he may have, and we'll include those in the show notes for this episode. It'd be great.
Okay. Yeah. You want me to just email them to Dennis?
Yeah. Yeah, you
Okay.
can
Either
email
one,
it to
that'd be
us and
fine, Todd.
We'll make it,
All right.
work.
Yeah,
Okay, this beetle, the name of this beetle is what?
It's an IPS beetle, IPS. IPS beetle.
Okay.
Yeah. Just any
I'll
kind of
tell you
search
what,
will show you it's an issue.
Yeah.
It's becoming an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's probably worse now, and it's just going to get worse. And, it's going to be what I'm saying about it getting worse. I don't want anybody to panic, freak out, and think they're going to take over the village, but it's time that we've got to start taking action, I guess is what I'm saying.
Is this something that you can do year round, Todd, or is this something that you said they go dormant in the winter?
Yeah, in the winter
so
time.
Clearly, my logic seems like it'd be best to do it then if you can.
That's
if the weather permits.
Yeah.
But then is there some date by which it's like, well, if we haven't done it now, then we're going to have to wait, or do you just continually year round tackle this?
No, I'll cut them year round. I mean, I like to do them when they're as infested as they are down here at the east end, what I'm doing right now. I like to do those in the wintertime so we can get them out of there before, they really go to spreading. But if we get a place that's infested, we can take them out in the summer too. Because, I'm not only taking out the dead trees, I'm also taking out some of the green ones to get the proper spacing in between your trees. And once you do that and you give the other trees about a year of that healthy nature and the sunlight and all the nutrition that they need, they just go to flourishing. I mean, this spot right here in a year's time, you can see a difference in the trees that will be there and the trees that's trying to grow. Right now, you've got some nice little hardwoods in this area that's trying to really flourish, and they can't because they haven't seen sunlight since they started sprouting on it. So now that they are, they'll really go to coming up. So it's best to take them out in the wintertime, but we can't take them out any time during the year.
I had a guy ask me the other day. He was wanting to landscape his front yard. Eddie at the Hibachi, actually. And he said, yeah, I want to landscape my front yard. And I really want to have like some beautiful green grass up there and everything. And I said, that's great, Eddie. How many trees are you planning on cutting? And he was like, what? No. I'm like, no sun to the ground, no green grass. And then he said, and Eddie's a problem solver this way. He said, I use AstroTurf.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, it'll be green year round.
It sounded appealing to me. I'm like, yeah, that does sound pretty good. But you said the IPS beetle, and I'm because it sounds too weird. They spread through the wind.
Yeah, the wind carries them. Like they get out on the trees and they can't fly, they don't jump and all that. They just kind of get in the wind and the breeze just carries them to different trees, and it just spreads through the wind. Kind of like a glider, like they're on these little mini hand gliders, and they just away they go.
Well, we just need to stop the wind.
We just need to stop the wind.
Right.
I was like, I was thinking that. I was thinking the same thing, Randy. I'm like, it's not been that windy.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, we just need to stop the way these beggars travel, man. That's
Exactly.
Well, let me come back to another question. So you're working with the and we mentioned, I think we played around this just a minute. So you typically work with the common properties, but and forestry and wildlife. But in case you're not doing enough things these days, when I met you a couple of weeks ago, you were spreading hundreds of tons of sand and salt over the roads.
I was. Yes, sir, I was. We had the ice storm hit, as everybody's aware of, and we were about to run out of sand. And so I called Johnny Minton at Cooper Concrete. I know Johnny real well. Hey, you got any concrete sand? That's what we use. And he said, yeah, I've got plenty. I figured you'd be calling me. That's what he said. And I told him, I said, hey, I need some. So we started hauling that in here, and we started using that. Yeah, we had to get about 100 ton more.
How many trucks is 100 ton?
Well, the truck that we have carries 10 tons, so that's 10 loads. He was just driving back and forth all day long hauling sand. But we got it in here, and our sand trucks were loading it when he was hauling it, and we was just constantly going and distributing sand. We had the sand for people that get stuck, they slide off the road, or for police vehicles, fire trucks needing to get somewhere, ambulances. most of the time for like accidents and people needing to get out that need sand there. But we put out lots and lots of sand.
We had a lady who was cleaning for us, and she called and said, I really need you to come help me. And I'm like, boy, she said, I was able to get here, but I'm having trouble getting out. And I came over to see her and I said, what's going on? And she said, you see where my truck is? And it was parked right in it, had two wheels off the road, kind of sitting on the ditch a little, and two wheels on the ice. And I said, yeah. She said, yeah, I parked it over there with the emergency brake. And she said, I got out and it skidded across she said, I slammed the door and it went.
Yeah. Hey, it was slick. We wear what we call ice spikes, and it's some rubber spikes. I mean, you got this, it's kind of like a rubber thing you put on your shoes. Looks like a chainsaw file.
I'm sorry,
chainsaw. It looks like a chainsaw chain.
Really?
But you put them on your shoes, and I've got some back here behind me, and you slide them on your shoes, and it spikes, and you can walk on that ice and stuff without slipping. It's kind of, and so all of us we wear those on ice. It's a safety precaution, keep somebody from sliding, because it's very slick.
Oh my Lord. My brother-in-law came and helped us push her out, and in the meanwhile fell and busted his keister. I did these slow motion splits for the first time in 45 years. And that was not I woke up sore the next morning, so there's that. Well, I'll tell you what, I know we need to wrap it up and give you your time back just for a minute, but let me come back. What's the most challenging thing of the common properties part of your job? What's the most challenging part there?
The most challenging, I would say, probably is trying to get, you've got so many different perceptions of what your forest should look like. And as far as our common property and our forestry, we've got so many acres of forest that has never been really maintained, that need to be. And in order to do that and to make it look good behind it it's probably the most challenging thing, because you're limited to what you can do. And, so that's really about the biggest challenge I have is maintaining our forest or developing a forestry plan, I guess it should say, a strategic plan that will satisfy everyone, kind of like a balance of meeting in the middle, and along with your aesthetics, because this is kind of a special place that you have to do certain different things with, and your hands are kind of tied, so you have to try to figure out certain ways to do it. But we can get it done.
I suspect the pine beetle doesn't care if it's on common property or private property. It
doesn't. It'll spread to wherever, and if people get it on their property, I urge them to get it taken out, get it cut down, hauled off. That should cure your problem, but that would be my advice. If you get pine beetles on your property, you get them cut down.
Todd seems like a good candidate for a lightning round, Dennis.
I think he'd be a fabulous. I'd want to know tacos or burgers. Did we mention the lightning round, Todd? Did we? No, we
didn't mention the lightning round.
We didn't mention the lightning round.
This is really easy. This is really easy and quick, and hopefully it lets the audience know a little bit more about you, the guy. The Jessieville native guy. Okay, so this is really quick, and then Dennis will say goodnight to us.
All right.
Hiking, hunting, or fishing?
Hunting.
Hamburger, tacos, or pizza?
Hamburger.
Favorite day of the week?
Friday.
Do you have a nickname?
I do.
Let's hear it.
It's Hoot. It's Hoot.
Hoot?
Hoot.
As in like what an owl does?
Well, when I was 14, I never wear contacts, but I wore glasses back then. And I had some great big black frame glasses. And they told me I looked like the northern spotted owl. Then they started calling me the spotted owl. Well, then that got shorted to Hoot. So now they call me Hoot. That's my CB handle, by the way.
So if you're ever on a CB, Randy, and you hear a hoot,
you'll know
it's Todd.
Who's
Yeah,
who's way better than northern spotted owl? I mean,
yeah, you know what I'm saying?
yeah, exactly. Okay, current favorite band or musician?
Current one?
Mm-hmm. What's
Be
on your
back in the
playlist
day.
right now? I'm sorry?
Be back in the day, probably AC/DC
Man,
or
look at
George
you.
Jones. One of the two. I know those
Nora
are two.
Jones, man, I was expecting.
Yeah.
I like
Hey,
that.
I love the old country music. Merle Haggard, George
Okay.
Jones, Waylon Jennings. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, what was it they said? What was somebody said? Somebody asked, what about Luke Bryant? And one of the old country guys said, I've never heard of her.
Yeah. Conway
Exactly.
Twitty would probably be my favorite musician of all time.
Yeah.
You are going old school. All right, you've got an hour to do nothing. What are you going to do?
An hour to do nothing? Probably kick back and do nothing. I mean,
Get her done.
get her done.
Sounds like my kind of guy. Favorite holiday?
Christmas.
Do you play a musical instrument?
No, I can't hardly even play radio.
Okay, your favorite meal. Describe it.
Favorite meal would be deer meat, fried deer meat, gravy and biscuits, mashed potatoes.
Is that the low fat version?
That's the low fat version.
Yeah.
Greasy too.
Yeah.
Sticks to your ribs.
Yeah, exactly.
First concert you ever went to?
Garth Brooks,
What year? Roughly.
1994.
All right. Funniest movie?
Funniest movie? Oh, I've seen some good ones. Probably the one where they go to Vegas and they take their buddy and he gets lost. I can't think of the name of it.
Hangover.
Hangover. There you go, Randy.
Yeah. Favorite sports team?
Arkansas Razorbacks. Woo pig.
Yeah. Cake.
WPS.
Yeah. Cake or pie?
Cake.
What kind?
Red velvet.
Man, there you go. How many hours of sleep do you get?
Probably 7.
What's your favorite article of clothing?
My blue jeans.
All right, last one. Do you have a favorite quote?
Do I have a favorite quote?
If you don't, that's okay.
No, I used to use one. Great moments arise from great opportunities.
I like it.
I like that a lot.
I
I
do
like
too.
that a whole lot. I think
If
that's
you don't
something to
have
close the show on. What?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have the opportunity to do something, then you can't ever show anybody how great you really are at it.
Well, and not only that, but opportunities a lot of times look like problems if you're not in the mood to solve them.
That's right. That's right.
What was it Henry Ford said? Most people miss great opportunities because they come in overalls and they look a lot like work.
Yeah, exactly.
I appreciate that one. I appreciate that one. Todd, I tell you what, I'll tell you what one of our goals here is, and I hope that our listeners and viewers that have stayed to this part of the show will appreciate that. And I see on social media where two people talk about, well, those stinking POA workers, they'll imply or say lazy or not getting our money's worth or whatever. These people don't know y'all. And I mean that sincerely. They don't.
And that's a minority, by the way.
It is. It's a hyper minority.
Dennis, I've been here. Well, I love Hot Springs Village. Hot Springs Village has been my workplace for way over half my life. And I've met some great people here in the village, and and a bunch of the people here, they don't really have family, and I treat them like family members. I love the village, and there's been instances where I've met, I'll give you an example, an elderly lady that went to the hospital. She didn't have any family. So my wife would cook supper and we'd bring it to her evenings when she got home. And I'm just one. There's several employees here at the POA that really, they love the village, they care for the village, and it's just like the ice storm. Not all the employees could get here, but there was 2 or 3 that wrecked their vehicles to try to get in here and open the roads up for the property owners. So they've done damage to their vehicles trying to get in to to work to get hard to get the roads opened up. And we work through the night and through the day. And this is just 1 year. We've done it several times in the past. But as me personally, hey, I love the village. The village has supported me and my family for many, many, many years. And, like I said, I've got some good friends that live here in the village. And, I love it. I love it here. I love working here. I love the property owners. And, I try to go above and beyond. Some of them say, well, so you're easy. You got that Southern drawl, that Southern accent. I didn't even know I had a Southern accent until I started working at it.
I think they have the accent, don't you?
Yeah, I do too. I do too. But, I just, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I feel honored to work here and to be around such a beautiful community with great people. And, I'll work as hard as I can to make sure that they, to try to heed every need that they have, to show them that you do care. And we've got lots of employees out here that really care for the property owners, and they work so hard. These guys work so hard. We've been short-staffed, and man, I have seen them just step up, and they have really worked hard. Now we've got a new general manager, and I've met him, and I think he's going to do an awesome job, Dennis. And we've got a great board, and we've got some really, really talented employees here. And the future is bright for Hot Springs Village. And we've got some employees that care, and they work hard to prove that they care and to get the job done. And they got great attitudes about it. So, I feel honored to be on your show, and I feel honored to work at such a wonderful place with wonderful people.
Well, I'll tell you what, when Jason suggested that we interview you, I thought, man, immediately, and I'd mentioned something to you at the committee meeting. I'd never met you before that, but I knew, how do I say this? In a small rural community, rural burbia or whatever you call it.
Right.
We don't have to have excellence. Jason could get the same paycheck, and you could get the same paycheck, and it just it's 8 to 5 and show up. And well, I'd try to get to work, but I'm not going to wreck my vehicle trying to get there. Well, no, these are my neighbors. This is not just my job. These are my neighbors,
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah. The honor's all on this side of the table, by the way.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And Todd, we sincerely appreciate you and your staff, because obviously, as Randy said a minute ago, we were joking earlier before we hit the button that you've got your acting street superintendent, and then you're doing your regular job. And I'm sure we've doubled your salary for that whole period, right? Because you're getting No, not hardly. Well, I tell you what, for you and the other unsung heroes, we appreciate you, buddy.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and like I said, it's I'm happy to do it. I'm honored to do it, and I know that all the other departments here at the POA, from the golf to wastewater and water to the fleet maintenance to everybody, I've seen it firsthand, and I can tell you truthfully that these guys, they work hard and they care, and I'm just I feel blessed and thank the good Lord every morning I get to come into a place like this to work.
Us too.
And I thank the good Lord for people like y'all that get it out there for people here.
You couldn't be nicer, Todd. Man, it's been a pleasure. For Hot Springs Village Inside Out, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can do that by visiting our website, hsvinsideout.com, and tell a friend.